President Cyril Ramaphosa has decided that the national dialogue is the hill that he's prepared to die on. And this has created a lot of debate in South Africa, a lot of anger in South Africa, but President Ramaphosa has taken the ANC along with him to say the national dialogue is the most important thing that South Africa needs right now. Let me explain to you. You've heard a lot of people say we don't need the national dialogue. They haven't necessarily explained why. Let me break it down for you. Because I've lived through the wrong decision being made at the wrong time, the wrong action being taken, an action that would have been appropriate at another time being taken at the wrong time. National dialogue falls squarely into that category. And we're going to delve a little bit into history, but we're not going to go too far away. We're going to go to Republic of South Africa in 1983. Okay, to some people that feels like just yesterday, if you've got a hairstyle like mine. To other people, it's before you were born. But let's explain what happened in 1983. And when you take a decision that would have been great if you had done it before, but when you do it at the wrong time, it's diabolical and dangerous. And I think the national dialogue falls into that case. So in 1983, South Africa was in the grips of apartheid. But apartheid was becoming more and more difficult to maintain in this country. South Africa was seeing increasing isolation, economic sanctions, but not the heavy stuff. We were still operating as a country, but we were in the naughty corner. The government of the time, the National Party, the architects of apartheid, under then Prime Minister PW Botha, he was Prime Minister, you can check me on this, it was that referendum that made him president. But this, in the build-up to that, decided that the world wanted South Africa to relent from apartheid. So in 1983, they called for a referendum. What was the referendum going to decide? It was a referendum amongst the voters, which were exclusively white, to give some political franchise to the coloured and Indian population. And South Africa, if you voted yes, South Africa was going to have what was called a tricameral parliament. In other words, you'd have two sub-chambers of parliament for coloureds and Indians. And technically, they could make decisions that could influence their own lives, but practically they had to answer to white people. There was no representation for black people under this referendum. It was, from the apartheid point of view, a move towards less racialism, if I could put it that way. To everybody else, this was like moving an inch when everybody wants you to move a mile. The referendum goes along, it gets passed. The National Party government tries to prove this as progress. If it had been done in 1963, it would have been viewed as progress, but in 1983, it was too little too late. It had exactly the opposite effect to what the government of the day expected. They expected people to say, well, we're on the road to progress. This is great. On the ground, it had exactly the opposite effect. South Africa absolutely went ablaze. Every part of South Africa suddenly turned into mass rioting. The rioting being, don't insult us with a little bit of change when we want a lot of change. This led to 7 years of hell, of rioting, of mass mobilization, of necklace murders, of lawlessness. As people said, if you can do this, you can do the rest. It gave birth to the United Democratic Front, the UDF, which we hear mythologized so much. What was the UDF? The UDF was a union of academics, religious leaders, political leaders, activists, everybody finally getting under one banner to say, we've had enough. This thing has to change. In a way, the apartheid government would have been better off had they done nothing. Instead, they give a little when people wanted a lot. The action didn't stop until long after Nelson Mandela was released from prison and South Africa was on its way to becoming the new South Africa. What is the lesson that comes out of this? There is nothing worse than doing too little too late. Sometimes it can have massive consequences. Which brings us back to the national dialogue. The national dialogue in and of itself, it's never a bad idea to have people together to discuss important issues, but national dialogues generally happen after war, after a great catastrophe. In fact, had President Cyril Ramaphosa called for a national dialogue after he became leader of the ANC in 2017 and the country had been ravaged by state capture, that would have been appropriate had we had this in 2018 or 2019 or 2020. Had we said, guys, this country has taken the wrong road, let's have a look at where we are. But no, at that point, President Ramaphosa and his fellow ANC travelers were hell-bent on defending all of the malfeasance, all of the corruption, all of the maladministration. We didn't need a national dialogue then, according to them. We only need it now once the ANC has lost their majority. So immediately it starts asking the question, and this is what people are feeling intrinsically what's wrong with this national dialogue, is that there was a time then that we should have had it, when the country really needed to come out of the ravages of the Zuma era, state capture, the collapse of institutions, to say, guys, what are we doing? Instead, President Ramaphosa defended everybody that had done everything up to that point, did nothing about it. People then do what people are going to do, which is to vote that party out, which they did by giving the ANC only 40%. And now that the ANC have lost their majority, I said, guys, let's talk about it. Sorry, the time for talking is over. In the 5 years since you should have had the national dialogue, back in 2019, the country has moved forward. We know what the problem is. We've had the Zondo Commission. We understand you went to the White House to tell the president that crime's out of control. What do you need to hear out of the national dialogue? We've had the most painful 5-year national dialogue. We've had people riot in KZN, burn things, break things. We've had the expression of South African people to say, this is unacceptable. Do your job. We then had the 2024 general election, in which people said, no, we've had enough of the ANC government. We've had enough of your corruption. No need for the national dialogue. 2019, they could have got the message and they could have got it peacefully. But by 2021, you had to get it through riots. 2019, you could have got the answer to say, we want the government to be more responsive to people. Instead, by 2024, we had to vote out the ANC of a majority to say, we don't want your bad policies. Now instead, President Cyril Ramaphosa thinks it's a good idea, too little, too late, to have a national dialogue to find out what we have said out of anger, at least 5 years after the national dialogue should have taken place. And South Africans are saying, enough of the talk. We have had 5 years to ventilate the problems, therefore you don't need to hear it again. You know what the problems are. We want to see corrupt politicians in jail. We want to see economic growth. We want to see the police do their work. We want to see politicians acting in the interests of the people that pay them, i.e., you and me, the taxpayer. But still, the ANC clings on to the fact that maybe the national dialogue will make us look like people that listen. Where have they been for 5 years when everybody, through every way possible, has spoken? You know, as a parent, you get to the point where you say to your children, enough, we're not going to talk anymore. We're now going to take action. Enough. And that's the point at which the South African citizenry finds itself. The idea of a national dialogue now is an insult to you and I. Even the reluctant bloodsuckers of the South African life, these foundations of people that once had a position, that now want to rule from the grave, saying, oh, we'll be part of your national dialogue because it's the only way we can keep the donations rolling in, have realized this is a bad idea, and they've gone. Even the great pipe smoker, Thabo Mbeki, with his foundation, who was the great advocate for this foundation, has realized, oh hell, best I head for the exit as well. Everybody has got the message, except for a few people that were so excited by being named eminent persons. These are generally academics or washed up politicians that are saying, I'm an eminent person. Oh my Lord, my ship has finally arrived. I want to be an eminent person. Let's have the dialogue. They're keen on it. Who else is keen on it? Well, the ANC are keen on it. Why? Because they see this as a way that the taxpayer can fund their electoral campaign for the next local government election. In other words, you're going to see an ANC person speaking to you, you're going to think, well, they're still in charge, I'll vote for them. No. As a taxpayer, we've given them enough. We don't need to give them the publicity of these people that listen to us when they have not listened to us. For 15 years, they haven't listened to us. Nobody was happy with the corruption back in the Zuma days. We had Ramaphosa because President Ramaphosa said he was going to do something about it. Instead, they've done nothing. And now they want to use your and my tax money to have a national dialogue which makes them look like people that are listening to you and I. They couldn't give a damn about you and I. They've proven that. They've proven that with their policies. They wanted to give us a 2 percentage point VAT increase. They didn't give a damn about us. Their foreign policy, which is going to hurt the South African economy. They say, oh, the struggle. No, it's going to hurt the South African economy. It's going to kill hundreds of thousands of jobs. They didn't ask us about that. Now they want us to give them solutions. No. All they want to do is they want to be on television looking like people that care. If they cared, we wouldn't have potholes in the road. We wouldn't, as Singizwe Losi said to President Trump, no, we don't just murder people, we rape old women. They would do something about it if they cared, but they don't care. They are just looking for affirmation. They are just looking for a way to say, vote for us, we still care, when they have proven without doubt that they don't care about you and I. They don't care about the country. All they care about is the next election. We recently interviewed ANC spokesperson Mahlengi Bengu Motsiri, who said very clearly We don't care if investors don't want to come to South Africa. They must go. They must go to India. She's got a job. She knows where her next salary is coming from. Do you? Do you know where your next salary is coming from? Not as much as she knows. So she can sit there and pass legislation that's going to chase away investment. Doesn't hurt her. It hurts you and I. So please understand that if you have the temptation to think, let's give this a try, all you're doing is you are saying yes to the taxpayer funding the ANC's campaigning. This will never lead to any solutions. How can it lead to solutions? You put 100,000 people into a room, everybody's got a different idea as to what the solution is. The solution is simple. Do your job. That's the solution. So to everybody that's thinking maybe we should support this national dialogue, don't fall for it. It's a trick. It's just a trick to keep the ANC in power when they don't deserve to stay in power. This is a party that has caused the damage. Now they're turning to the public and saying, oh, sorry, we caused all this damage. Please tell us what is the solution. The solution is to get rid of you. That's what we should be focusing on. So, this national dialogue is a very bad idea, and much like the referendum in 1983, where the National Party thought this could save our necks, in actual fact ended up cutting their necks off, right? Could very well be the same case in South Africa 42 years later. Let's hope that this message gets to people with a little bit more savvy and they stop with this expensive joke coming at your and my expense. They say that this money is going to come out of the presidency when the presidency doesn't have the budget. They say it's going to be out of NEDLAC, which is a government-funded organization. It's our money. All they want to do is steal our money and let their campaign be run by the National Dialogue. Don't fall for it. Another weekly update rant. Join us on the State of the Nation. We'll call it as it is.